Chapter 108, Silver Ticket. Yu Fengyan in the previous life had never used such a method. It's just that she mentioned it, and Zhang Xuning remembered it. Renhuizi and Zigong Salt Farm are just ups and downs, and ordinary people can't expect the beginning to be in the middle, and the middle is not expected to be in the end, which is a typical example of how to make money in this way. It's just that Zhang Xuning is also doing this kind of thing for the first time, and there is no precedent to refer to, so she is always extra careful. I'm afraid I'll miss the time if I'm not careful. However, compared to others, she has the advantage of a prophet, so she is not as anxious and excited as others, and she always has to sit and wait in the lobby of the Shuxiang Inn to feel at ease. Zhou Yunzi knew that Zhang Xuning was related to Yu Fengyan of Qingyu and Bafu, but he didn't know what the two of them were going to do. But recently, there have been some rumors in the Fang market, and they have also reached his ears, knowing that Yu Fengyan is going to marry Renhuizi, and he naturally heard about the silver shares in the Shudi salt farm. Originally, I didn't expect Zhang Xuning to come here. However, listening to her words at this moment, Zhou Yunzi's mind flashed, and he suddenly vaguely guessed that most of the 15,000 taels of silver shares left in the salt field were in Zhang Xunning's hands, and then remembered the 10,000 taels of silver that Miss Bafu had extorted for Zhang Xuning earlier, and his heart couldn't help but be shocked. The quaint body of the piano has been played in the incense for many years. Even if there is no incense around at the moment, there are faint wisps of Zen incense. After a hook, the tremor of the strings did not stop. Zhang Xuning stared at these strings and only asked, "Is there any news from the DPRK and China recently?" Zhou Yunzi, the case of the Marquis of Yanji is still investigating. I heard that the three law divisions are arguing all day long. On the one hand, he believed that although the home mansion had exchanged letters with the rebel ministers and the rebel party, Tai was half because he wanted to inquire about the whereabouts of the son of Ding Fei 20 years ago, which was really related to family affection, and could not be punished as a conspiracy, and it was enough to confiscate the family property and reduce it to the common people. The other party decided that it was just a pretext to inquire about the whereabouts of the prince. Everyone knows that Xiao Yan's two clans died 20 years ago. If you want to find it, you should go to the Yitong tomb to find it. Yanji Ho Yanmu knows that the other party is a thief and still wants to contact. It is clear that he has a counter-intention. Even if he is not punished for the crime of extermination, the culprit such as Yan Shepherd and his wife and children should also be the head of the owl to show the public to serve the world. Zhang Xuning was silent after hearing this, and after a long time, he suddenly said, "Young Master Xie is now in charge of the Hanlin Academy, and his authority in the court is flourishing, and his ears and eyes should also be well informed. Do you have the right people at your disposal who can hear something?" Zhou Yunzi was stunned. Zhang Xuning slowly added, "After the Heavenly Sect gang gets the money from me, they will definitely not stay in the capital, but want to secretly leave this place. You are a Jinyue, and you don't have the power. You can't do this. It's better to leave it to someone else to do." This money was originally prepared by her for the Yanji Marquis mansion, but she didn't want it to fall into the hands of the young people. However, she alone could not stop this. What's more, she was also afraid that the other party would eat her money and not give the letter. She didn't hit the rabbit and was pecked by the eagle. The important thing is that the letter can't be missed, so in addition to herself, it is best to have a layer of protection.
星号
Zhou Yunzi really couldn't figure out her intentions. This young Master Xie is by no means a simple character, and it is not a simple matter to pass on the news unintentionally. However, in a blink of an eye, he thought of Zhang Xuning's relationship with Xie Wei. It should be considered a teacher and student, right? But if Xie Wei knows, why don't you say it directly? Maybe the relationship between the two is probably a little unusual. It's really not something he can speculate. It's better to pretend that he doesn't know anything, don't think about anything, and just think about how to do it. After seeing Zhang Xuning, Zhou Yinzi left with the 10,000 taels of silver tickets. When he came out of the house, he happened to see a very ordinary carriage stop at the door. As soon as he raised his eyes, it was Yu Fangyin who got out of the car. The two looked at each other. Yu Fangyin was stunned when she saw him, but then she smiled and saluted him, but after all, it was not easy to speak at the door of Jiang's mansion, so she walked in like this. Yu Fangyin is about to get married. In the past 2 days, Zhang Xuning was also thinking about finding an opportunity to ask her to come out to meet and explain some things, but she didn't expect her to come to the door first, and she couldn't help but be a little surprised. Looking at this girl closely, it is not very different from the past. Probably also knows that people are going to get married, and the face of the uncle is always perfunctory, and it doesn't cost a lot of money to cut clothes that can be seen for such a concubine, and he also expects Ren Weizi to make more money over there, which is naturally not too bad for Yu Fangyin. Wearing a new water-red dress on his body, his complexion is also a lot ruddy, which is rare and beautiful. Zhang Xuning pulled her around and looked around, and then she became happy in her heart, and said, "It turns out that I still think that this Ren Weizi is nothing more than that, but seeing that you have changed your appearance, you don't have to suffer in the mansion, and I feel that this person is barely worthy of our Fangyin." Yu Fangyin blushed by her, and said, "Yes, it's a fake marriage." Zhang Xuning then remembered, "Oh," and couldn't help sighing, "Marriage is such a big event, many daughters only have one time in their lives, but this is a last resort, and you are wronged very much." Yu Fangyin didn't feel any grievances. Getting married is certainly a major event that many people only have once in a lifetime, but for her, the life in Qingyu and Bafu is really miserable. If she can take this opportunity to escape, it is a fortunate thing that she never dared to think of before. She didn't dare to sleep too deeply these days. "I am afraid that I will fall asleep and wake up to find that it is all just a dream." She didn't know how to express her feelings, so she only shook her head seriously and vigorously, and said, "No, there is no grievance." It was Ren Gongzi who agreed to Fangyin, which made it a little difficult for him. Embarrassed. Took a sum of money to marry a good girl, although it was a fake marriage, but it was also a good thing that could not be found with a lantern in the world, so Ren Weizi dared to feel embarrassed? Zhang Xuning snorted softly in her heart. It's just that he didn't say anything in front of Yu Fangyin, but said, "You came just in time, seeing that someone will come to Shudi to pick you up to get married in a while. If it's late, I'm afraid I won't have a chance to give it to you." As she spoke, she turned around and opened the box again. There's also a stack of silver tickets. Zhang Xuning picked it up and put it into Yu Fangyin's hand, and said, "I'm afraid that I won't show up the day you go out. After all, your sister Yu hates me to the bone, and she may want to strangle me when you meet. But I also want to know that Ep's virtue, and your mean sister, will definitely not prepare much dowry for you. Originally, I prepared more for you, but there was an accident these days, and there were more places to use the money, so I only left the 3,000 taels of silver tickets, and you took it with you, and you must not let others know, and don't tell you even if you are a servant. Even if you believe in him, you may not cause any other trouble. When I come to Shu in the future, if there is a case, I can't take care of you in the capital, so you have more money in your hand, so you can respond to an emergency. 3,000 taels for her as a dowry." Yu Fangyin was startled, but she felt that the silver ticket was extremely hot, so she didn't dare to take it at all, so she hurriedly pushed it back, panicking, the girl, have been very good to me, how can I ask for the girl's money?" Zhang Xuning guessed that she wouldn't take it, but she insisted on giving this money to Yu Fangyin. Her attitude was very resolute, and she looked at her seriously and said, "This is not only for you, but also to prevent the salt field from having a case. There's nothing wrong with thinking about it a little more. If the salt farm is operated, Renwiazi will give you dividends, and of course you don't have to touch the money I gave you. When you have the opportunity in the future, you can return it to me. The bento was lent to you, okay? Yu Fangyin hesitated at this time. Zhang Xuning said something bad again, and she accepted the money, but her eyes were red, her eyes were full of tears, she was stupid, and she wanted to speak but didn't know how to speak. Zhang Xuning had no choice but to take a handkerchief to wipe her tears. At the moment, he was helpless and funny, and changed the topic. It's okay to stay in the house recently, your sister didn't embarrass you. Yu Fangyin said, no, the second sister was annoyed for a few days when she heard that the silver stocks at the Shuxiang Inn had fallen, but then the silver stocks rose again, so she was happy all day long, and even took me out to buy new clothes and buy some jewelry, which was good for me. It seems that Yu is quite proud. Zhang Xuning said in her heart and let her be proud for another 2 months, and when she cried when she turned around. However, he wouldn't say this in front of Yu Fangyin, so he only smiled slightly and said, then it can't be better.
星后
Zhang Xuning waited for a suitable time, and after thinking about her plan, she also explained a few words to Yu Fangyin. Zhou Yinzi's side was quickly completed. For the next 10 days, there was no news from Shuti, but everyone was faintly expecting something. The closer to the day when the concubine from Qingyu and Bafu came out of the pavilion, the more businessmen came and went in the Shuxiang Inn. I want to know with my toes. The Ren family of Shu is going to send someone to pick up the concubine to marry to Shu, and at the same time, it will definitely bring the latest news of the salt farm, and once Zhou Tuajing can really extract the lower well salt from the salt well that has been scrapped, the silver stock price of this Ren salt farm will soar. The crowd looked forward to it, and the days passed. Soon it was the 23rd day of December, the day before Yu Fangyin left the pavilion. The people who came to greet their relatives in Shu have finally arrived. In the lobby of the Shuxiang Inn that morning, it was full of people, even if they didn't buy the silver shares of Ren Salt Farm, and even knew that they were afraid that they wouldn't be able to buy it, but they also wanted to come to join in the excitement and see the unprecedented wonders of this business. From time to time, everyone looked to the door. Everyone who came in had to turn their heads and look at it, but they sat until early noon, and the people and news they were waiting for had not yet arrived. Seeing that it was almost noon, some of them dispersed. Those who live close have to go home for dinner. Some people are impatient, but more people just order food in this inn and still wait persistently. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a strong man in a short and energetic suit galloped from afar, only threw the reins at the door of Xiao Erai, and walked into the Shuxiang Inn with a big stride to wipe the hot sweat in the cold weather, and shouted loudly in an official dialect with a certain Shu accent, "What about the shopkeeper?" When everyone heard this, their spirits were shocked. The shopkeeper was telling them to hurry up to the back kitchen to urge the food, and when he heard the voice, he turned his head and saw people, and his eyes suddenly lit up, but the person sent by Ren Gongzi. The sturdy man smiled heartily, revealing a row of white teeth, obviously extremely happy, and said, "Exactly. I am a newly hired domestic servant of Ren Gongzi, and I specially brought someone to Beijing to welcome the future young grandmother into Shu." The zhou tube well made by Ren Gongzi had already drawn salt brine from the salt wells that had been scrapped in the past and could no longer be mined 7 days ago, and boiled new well salt, and the entire salt field of Zigong came to see when I left. Ren Gongzi came to the inn to inform me, and asked the shopkeeper to write this news on the board, and hang it up so that the people who bought the silver shares of our salt field can rest assured. His voice was not small, and everyone in the lobby heard it. So with a boom, it all exploded, and suddenly the lobby was full of people, and no one could hear who was saying anything. The man was chic, because he still had something to do. He wanted to go to Qingyu and Bafu to pick up people. He didn't stay long, and left after reporting the news. Everyone was thrilled by the news. There are also a small number of people who wonder if Renwiazi is cheating. After all, this kind of thing really sounds like a legend, a little unbelievable, and people dare not believe it. In the afternoon, however, other news came. The most well-informed about the salt works were naturally the major salt merchants, and it was soon confirmed that this matter was indeed true. Well salt mining, salt brine deep underneath, the original well salt mining, but to drill a well, can have 3 or 4 jang deep is already amazing, deeper but there is no way. Often, when a well is mined 3 or 4 jang and cannot produce salt brine, it will be abandoned. However, Zhou tube well can hit 10 jang or even dozens of jang underground. The bamboo tube that is opened is drilled down, and the salty spring gushes from the bottom of the well. The salt merchants in the southern part of the Yangtze River are okay. After all, they all live on the sea and divert sea water into salt, and there has been a change in the technology of mining experience, and the impact on them is not great for the time being, but there are more competitors. The big salt merchants in the Sichuan area know the news, but they can't sit still no matter what, no matter where they are. After learning the news, they all hurry up and rush to the Zigongren salt field to see and learn. As soon as this Zhou tube well comes out, it is already going to change the pattern of the entire Shudi salt industry. The more news that everyone heard, the smaller the voice of doubt, and the higher the enthusiasm for the silver stocks of Ren Salt Farm, and the price of silver stocks naturally began to rise. There are more than 600 texts and no one wants to publish them at all. Someone in the lobby shouted 700, 800, 900, but no one answered. It wasn't until the next day that 1,000 silver stocks suddenly appeared on the market, but they said they wanted to sell them, and they were snatched up at a high price of 1,000 yuan a share, that is, 1 tael of silver. The time Zhang Xuning was waiting for had finally arrived. Of course, the silver stock price of Ren Salt Farm will continue to rise for a while, but the matter of the letter from the Yanji Marquis mansion is imminent, and the patience of the Tianjiao gang is afraid that it will run out. Even if she knows that she can make more money in the future, she doesn't dare to wait any longer. The 1,000 silver stocks on the market were released by her to explore the situation. But she didn't show up for this deal, and neither did the buyer, and they didn't know each other's identities. Zhang Xuning extorted 10,000 taels of silver from Qingyuan Bafu at that time, and all of them were handed over to Yu Fangyan to enter the silver shares of Ren Salt Farm, which can be said to be the person who holds the most silver shares in the salt field now, with a total of 20,000 shares. A few days ago, the hundreds of shares in Boss Liu's hand were also taken away by her at a low price. It's just a fraction of what she sees. After releasing 1,000 shares, she still had 19,000 taels in her hand, which was worth 19,000 taels of silver based on the current silver stock price. Previously, the money in her hand was close to 40,000 taels, but she took some of it for Yu Fangyan as a dowry, and she had to keep some of it in her hand for emergencies, so it was about 15,000 taels. But that's not a decimal number. There won't be many people who can afford this money. If she directly releases 15,000 shares to the market, I'm afraid that it will be okay and cause others to wonder if there is anything greasy in this. Why should she throw it away when the stock price of Ren Salt Field silver has just soared? The price may go down. So Zhang Xuning only let people release the news in batches, one by one, and by the way, she waited for the fish to bite the hook. It can be said that everyone in Beijing who is engaged in business is concerned about this matter, and as soon as the news was released, countless people were interested and expressed their willingness to bid. The wind reached Lucien in the blink of an eye. Others couldn't notice the clues, but Lucien felt a little strange, and his eyes suddenly flashed. No, this situation is not right. The market of Ren Salt Farm is bullish, and if you can throw 1,000 shares and then throw another 1,000 shares, I am afraid that there is only a person who holds a large amount of silver stocks. At this time, if you sell silver stocks, You are either not optimistic about the future situation of Ren's salt farm, or you are. This man is short of money right now. There was no one in the secluded pavilion. Xiawei sat cross-legged across from him, watching him pull the abacus in front of him, and couldn't help but say, others are short of money, so what? Lucien's eyes rolled around, and he smiled. Of course, it's a good time to rob while it's hot. He already had some thoughts in his heart, and he put it down halfway through the abacus, and actually got up directly, saying, no, I can't miss such a great opportunity. Xiawei frowned. I still want to talk to you about the heavenly sect. Lucien waved his hand and didn't reply. Since you have news of those people, they are going to go out of the city in the near future, and it is easy to capture these people, so you don't need to discuss it with me. Lao Tzu is in a hurry to make money. No matter how important you are, I'll go out and find someone first.
星号
It's snowing outside. It's been going on for days. Lucien thought about it before going out, and just in case, he simply put the silver ticket and the seal letter on his body, took an umbrella from Xiao Tong's hand and went straight to Beguo Temple in Beijing. He has sent people to keep an eye on King Yuan's Bafa these days. Lucien knew Yu Fangian's whereabouts well. Tomorrow we'll set off from the capital to Shudi. Of course, the girl before the marriage is to go to the temple to make incense, and pray for a smooth marriage. Although Yu Fangian is a fake marriage, there are a lot of things that should be done, and there are no flaws on her face. This time, I was accompanied by a little girl from the house. Lucien didn't take this kind of small roll in his eyes, and casually sent someone to leave the little girl outside to talk, but he knocked on the door unceremoniously. Is Yu Fangian you girl inside? In Xiaoluzayan, there is a business I want to talk to the girl. Yu Fangian came to worship the temple today, and asked for a sign by the way. At this moment he was looking at the signature carefully, and almost trembled when he heard the knock on the door, and then heard the people outside report their door, and a face appeared in his mind. The second girl expected it to be good, and this person really came to find it. She couldn't help admiring it in her heart, but she was also a little nervous, so she calmed down and said, please come in. Lucien pushed the door in. A simple meditation room, very simple, hung with a simple empty word. Just raised his eyes and saw Yu Fangian. He couldn't help but be stunned. In the past, this girl had been photographed in the Shuxiang Inn, wearing a coarse dress worn by a maid, and even some yellow and thin muscles, looking delicate but also very shabby. It wasn't until this time that Lucien realized. Yes, the girl is going to get married tomorrow, but she still dares to come to talk about business today, which is really not small. Yu Fangian asked, I don't seem to have made an appointment with you. I don't know if Boss Lu came here. What business do you want to discuss? Lucien came back to his senses at this time, and after smiling, he dispelled the strangeness of the moment in his heart, and said, others don't know, but Miss Yu and I should know. Don't say dark words in front of the Ming people. The person who released the rumor in the Shuxiang Inn today to sell the silver shares should be the girl, or rather, the person behind the girl, right? Yu Fangian did not speak. Lucien said confidently, although Lu doesn't know where the girl needs to use this lot of money, she must be in a hurry to sell the silver shares, right? I, Lu someone, have been in business for many years, and I don't have to say anything about my reputation. Rather than throwing thousands of shares and thousands of shares out, which is troublesome to deal with, and being careful not to be discovered, it is better to give me as many as you want, and I will take all the orders. Miss Yu, think about it. Yu Fangian remembered Zhang Xuaning's instructions, so she asked, can you also afford to pay 1,000 things? Lucien's lips suddenly hung a little smirk. There are few silver stocks in the market, so the price is high, and it is not unusual to have this price. But if Miss Yu threw out all the silver stocks in her hand in one go, the price would not be so high. Robbery while the fire is hot, that's the point. Lucienne has the essence of it. Euphanion held her breath in her heart when she heard this. Fortunately, these were all things that Zhang Xuning had told her before, and now that she heard it from Lucienne's mouth, she didn't have much anger. I just think that the second girl is really like a god. Even the person in front of him took the opportunity to reduce the price after biting the hook. She frowned and said, "Then how much is Boss Lu?" Lucienne asked rhetorically, "How much is Miss Yu?" Yu Fang groaned, 15,000 shares. Lucienne secretly gasped, and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and said, 13,000 taels. When Euphanion heard this, his little face turned cold, and he said, "Boss Lu didn't come to buy it sincerely at all." Lucienne smiled, "Very sincere. Euphanion wants to send off guests." Lucienne didn't leave, his fingers lightly clasped the edge of the table, and his posture was very free. "You, or the owner behind you, are missing 15,000 taels." A little anger appeared in Euphanion's eyes. Seeing her like this, Lucienne knew more and more that he had guessed correctly. The feeling of being in control of everything made him feel that he was very happy, as if he had pinched the life of the girl in front of him. He became more and more leisurely, and added, "Miss Yu doesn't have to look at it with this kind of eyes, she is talking business. In business, everyone has a time when money is tight, and I, Lu someone, have always been kind, and I am willing to help people when I can. Since there is a shortage of 15,000 taels, why don't you give me 17,000 silver shares? Let's negotiate the business with a hammer, and save the girl from worrying about those little money." Maybe it was because of this that Euphanion's heart, and he looked at the other party's expression as if he was hesitating, as if he was seriously considering what he said. Lucienne made persistent efforts with great scheming and continued to encourage her. The words after words can be said to be bitter, and she also said that if she put these silver stocks on the market in one go, she was afraid that people would suspect that there was something behind the salt works, and she might not even be able to sell them. But Euphanion still didn't let go. At this time, Lucienne made a killer move, turned his face and said, "After saying so much, Miss Yu has no intention of selling these silver shares. It seems that this business cannot be negotiated. Then Lu will take his leave first." With that, he got up and bowed his hand to Euphanion. Euphanion didn't stop him. Lucienne walked out of the meditation room, and at the same time counted silently in his heart, and sure enough, when he counted to 3, there was a panicked voice from behind him, "Boss Lu stays." A triumphant smile overflowed from Lucienne's lips. He knew it was done. This method of bargaining, although old, has been tried and tested repeatedly. It's just that at this time, he turned his back to Euphanion, and he didn't see the same relieved smile on the honest girl's face. One is in a hurry to ask for money, the other is in a hurry to ask for shares. The two sides hit it off. Lucienne came with a silver ticket and yen xian, and he was determined to get it, needless to say, but what surprised him was that Euphanion also carried yen xian with him, and signed a contract with him almost immediately. One hand stamps the letter, and the other hand pays the money. Lucienne took the contract and left, and Euphanion took the silver ticket and left. When he left from Beguo Temple, Lucienne was simply very excited, and he was in his hands for most of the silver shares of Ren Salt Farm, and he would only wait for the silver from Beiwawa to enter his account in the future. But after walking out for 3 miles, the smile on his face suddenly froze. He held the contract in his arms, but his mind instantly flashed over the picture when the concubine of Nea Mansion also took out the seal letter from her body, and there was an almost buzz in his head. If it is not also a will, if it is not prepared, who will carry the seal letter when he goes out to offer incense? He took advantage of the fire to rob him. But can people not know that someone will take advantage of the fire to rob? This thought actually felt half cold in my heart, and I suddenly knew that I was too anxious, absolutely lack of money. The other party is absolutely crazy and short of money. If I can calm down a little more, I will definitely be able to lower the price. Damn. I jumped into the set prepared by someone else. Lucien's face was almost green, and it would have taken only half an hour to go back, but he walked for a while and stopped for a while, and he was stunned until it was dark, and when he returned to the secluded pavilion, his expression was like a mournful examination, which was terrifying. Siewei hadn't left at this time. Hearing the sound of pushing the door, I looked up and saw Lucien walking in with a cold air, and his eyebrows couldn't help but raise slightly. What's wrong with you? Lu Xiantai blushed and didn't speak, only put the contract on the table. Siewei glanced at it and said, "Isn't this a negotiation?" Lucien said, "The price is too high. For a businessman, it is absolutely a great shame to be able to get a higher price for a business that can be won at a lower price." Lucien thought about it, and knew that he was the top at that time. Siewei listened to what he meant, but he immediately understood why his face was so bad. A person like Lu Ziyin is unwilling to take a step back and only take 9 points if he can take advantage of 10 points, and he must take all 10 points before he feels that he is not at a loss. I think that although the silver shares were in his hands, the price instinct was too low, but he didn't suppress them, so he was angry. God knows that at this time, Lucien's mind was full of Yu Fangian's face, and after this experience, he couldn't help but think of the raw silk business that was taken by someone earlier, and the more he thought about it, the more he didn't feel the taste in his heart, and secretly said that this beam was deep. It took a long time for him to force himself to suppress this anger. Then he noticed that Siewei hadn't left at such a late hour, so he said, "Why are you still there?" Siewei looked out the window and said quietly, "There is something to do tonight, waiting for news." Asterisk. It was getting dark. The 15,000 taels of silver tickets were transferred from Yu Fangian's hands to Zhang Xunning's hands, and then to Zhou Yanzi's hands, and finally handed over to the two black-clothed masked people. Zhou Yanzi only brought Wuxi. There are only two people on the other side. Instead, he kept his promise, paid the money with one hand, and handed over the letter with the other. Thinking that both sides were very cautious, and because of this very special matter, they didn't dare to let more people know, and while checking the letter was no problem, while reading the silver ticket was no problem, they didn't even say a word, and turned around and left. The two men in black took advantage of the darkness to go away. Halfway up the road, I looked left and right and saw that there was no one, and then I entered an alley, and when I came out again, I had changed into ordinary clothes, and my face was exposed, all of which were unremarkable. There is no news from Gonggai Cheng. The silver ticket has been handed down again. In their hearts, these people still thought that the Yanji Marquis mansion could be regarded as a loyal martyr, and they also thought about conspiring with the heavenly sect, and they sold the letter to be regarded as a good deed. But staying in the capital, I was afraid of long nights and dreams, so I wanted to leave the capital that night with some connections left in the capital by the heavenly sect and fly away. However, just as they approached the city gate with a huge amount of silver in their arms, and made a secret signal to the people who had been in contact with them in the past, they were greeted by arrows flying down from the city gate. Shot. 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 In the darkness, the arrow slashed through the sharp light, and easily sank into the heads of these people, and the silver tickets in their arms were not even hot, and before they even knew what was happening, they had already fallen to the ground, staring at a pair of eyes and losing their breath. On the tower of the city gate, Dayakan, who had been ambushed here, neatly collected his bow, stood in the dark corner of the gatehouse that was not easy to be noticed, and instructed the others around him, "Go down and search carefully, and see if there is anything that the gentleman wants." Immediately, several shadows descended from above. Searched up and down carefully, but did not touch any letters, but found a thick pile of silver tickets, handed them to Dayakan, and said hesitantly, "Dayakan Gongzi, I have searched all over them, and none of these people are on them. As soon as Dayakan took the thick pile of silver tickets, he frowned. At present, those who are dying under the city tower are all people who secretly listen to the dispatch of the official ceremony, and there shouldn't be so many silver tickets. Where does the money come from? He thought about it for a while, and suddenly had an extremely bad premonition in his heart. His face suddenly changed, and he didn't even say a word, and went straight down the city gate tower and turned over his horse, and galloped away in the direction of the secluded pavilion. The lights were lit in the room, but suddenly the lights exploded. Lucien had a dark face, and his voice was extremely loud. Siewei touched a white jade chess piece in his hand, staring at the chessboard in front of him, but he didn't move for a while, until there was a little boy outside who said that the Dayakan Gongza came back. He raised his eyes sharply, and there was a little flickering killing intent buried in his silent eyes. Dayakan walked in. Siewei asked, "How?" Dayakan knew that the matter was urgent, so he didn't dare to say anything else, but he handed him the thick pile of silver tickets that he had previously collected from those people, and said, "I didn't find the letter that Gongai asked them to send, only the 50,000 taels of silver tickets were found on them." Only silver tickets, no letters. Siewei's heart was suddenly cold, and he felt a trembling sense crawl up his body from his spine. He knows the human heart too well. Almost instantly, I guessed what was happening. After losing contact with Gongai Iken, these people must have been greedy when they had a letter in their hands, and exchanged this letter for this large sum of money. The chess piece pressed in his hand suddenly fell into the palm of his hand. Siewei's eyebrows flashed angrily, and the black and white chess pieces on the chessboard shook under his eyes, making him upset, and he actually raised his hand to push the chessboard, shaking the chess pieces to the ground. Cracking sound. But inside and outside the house, it became more and more silent. Lucien was not in a good mood, but at this time, he didn't even dare to breathe. It's just that when his eyes inadvertently crossed over the pile of silver tickets, he suddenly couldn't hold back a "Why do these two silver tickets look so familiar?" His heart pounded. An astonishing thought suddenly crossed his mind, and he reached out and grabbed the stack of silver tickets in his hand, and looked at them one by one. The more you look, the brighter your eyes become. Lucien's heartbeat was so fast that there was even an indescribable excitement that hit him, and he directly pulled out one of the 15,000 taels of silver tickets, put them in front of Siewei, and said in a trembling voice, "Do you recognize it?" Siewei frowned. "What?" Lucien took a deep breath. "This is obviously the silver ticket I used when I took it out to buy the silver shares of the salt field in the afternoon. Tong Hung silver trumpet, 15 in a row, is not only a mark, but even the creases left in my arms when I left are exactly the same." I couldn't have understood what that means. Lucien was afraid that Siewei would not believe it, so he only spread out the stack of silver tickets in front of Siewei one by one, and pointed out the conclusive details in the middle to him. I said that I suddenly wanted to throw away the silver stocks that had risen well, but I didn't expect it to be used here. If the person who issued the silver ticket is the buyer of the letter, this person must have an inextricable relationship with the lady of the Qingyuan Bafu. And who would have paid such a large price for such a letter that could be called evidence of the Ho Mansion's crimes? Either it is a big enemy who can't put the Ho Mansion to death. Either. Siewei was suddenly silent for a while. His slender fingers lightly rested on the edge of a flat 1,000 taels of silver tickets on the table, and in the middle of his thoughts, he folded a corner, and saw a few narrow ink marks left on the edge of the silver ticket. His brow furrowed, and his gaze fell on it and did not move. Lucien also noticed the place he was looking at, and couldn't help but be stunned, and said, "Why don't I remember that there were these ink blots before?" Siewei raised his eyes and glanced at him. Next, as if thinking of something, he turned all the 15 silver tickets to the back one by one. Lucien was stunned. Because on the right edge of each silver ticket, there are a few narrow ink blots that stop abruptly. Siewei thought for a while, then adjusted the order, and arranged the 15 silver tickets one by one against the ink on the right edge, one on top of the other, but staggered the narrow one in turn, and all the ink blots fit together like a puzzle. It turned out that someone left a letter on the silver ticket. The handwriting is not particularly neat, and it is even a little sloppy and crooked, and it actually reads a little aggrieved and pitiful, and it is written, "Sir, it's me. I knew I was wrong." At the end, a little king is also drawn. At this moment, Siewei couldn't hold back for a moment, laughed out loud, and the anger in his eyes suddenly turned clean like ice and snow. Chapter 109, Ask Yourself and Be Open. Is that? What's that? Lucien sat opposite Siewei. Those words were not very neat. He couldn't help but lean forward to turn his head over to take a closer look. What is written? Is it a code left? However, as soon as he leaned his head towards Siewei's side, Siewei's eyes were raised, and he glanced at him lightly. The subordinates naturally collected the stack of silver tickets that had been put together. Lucien was dumbfounded. Siewei explained, "It's not written for you." A little suspicion suddenly appeared on Lucien's face, and he secretly glanced at the silver ticket that had been put back in order. Frowned, and said in a surprising voice, "Euphangion's love letter to you. Dogs can't spit ivory out of their mouths." The haze that had shrouded Siewei's body before also dissipated with the smile like melting ice and snow before. Siewei's whole person seemed to have returned to the calm and steady of the old world's independence, and only said, "No." Lucien said, "I guess not. Miss Yu is getting married, and she has nothing to do with you, so she won't write anything to you at this time." "Which girl wrote you love words?" Siewei's eyebrows frowned slightly. What kind of love words are not affectionate? Lucien's gaze didn't take his eyes off the pile of silver tickets in his hand that still hadn't been put down, and his eyes revealed a bit of scrutiny. "It's not written to you by the girl. It's a big deal. Why can't I read it?" The 50,000 silver tickets found from the Tianjiao secret pile that was directly under Gong Gai Icon's orders contained the 15,000 taels he had paid to Euphangien before, and these 15 silver tickets of 1,000 taels were stacked together and actually had secret characters. The whole thing is about the safety of the Marquis of Yanji. After Siewei read this message, he seemed to be relieved, as if this matter had been controlled, and it was no big deal. However, Lucien's feeling was just the opposite of Siewei. It's not that this incident itself makes him so jealous, but what makes him faintly feel uneasy and vigilant, is the state that Siewei revealed at that moment, a state that he felt should not appear on Siewei. Siewei was really stopped by him. Such a handwriting, such a tone, and a little Wang Bie that he had seen before, that is, there was not a word of signing. He knew who left this word, and he knew who was behind Euphangien, so he put his mind at ease. Amway said that he should show Lu Zheyin both this matter and this word. However, he didn't want to. His eyes were raised, and he met the gaze cast on the opposite side impartially. Siewei was also a keen person, so he would not be able to perceive the meaning of Lucien's words. "Lu Xiandao, do you know what I admire most about you after knowing each other for so many years?" Siewei didn't speak for the time being. Lucien tugged at the corners of his lips, but there was not much smile in his eyes. "It's not your wisdom, it's not your forbearance, it's that you're not close to women." However, Siewei went through it from beginning to end, and he didn't feel that he had done anything wrong. Ning Er was his student, but neither this word nor this painting was very good on the table. And Ning Er is different from others after all. He didn't want to explore the truth of this little girl, but he wanted to restrain her and teach her not to make her go down the wrong path, and he asked himself if he had any selfish intentions in addition to this, and he had no desire for sex between men and women. Xie pressed the stack of silver tickets in his hand, and still didn't mean to return it to Lucien, and said, "It's just a little trick, it's not on the table, and it's also ridiculous and generous to show people, you are too worried." Lucien couldn't help but want to judge whether this was true or false. But seeing that Xie's expression was indeed no different, at this time he really suspected that it was his villain's heart and suspicious, but it's better to worry more than to think less. It seems that the trouble has been resolved, but did you see who the letter had fallen to, or did the other party make it clear in the message? If it is the latter, did you tell others in advance about the news of our action? Xie's fingers pressed on the silver ticket froze for a moment. Lucien immediately raised his eyebrows when he saw it. He and Xie have known each other for a long time, so much so that when he looks at the subtle expression of the other party, he knows that he has poked something, but the smart man should stop at this point. Glancing out of the dark window, Lucien said, "You should go back." Xie got up and said goodbye. Before leaving, he also took the 15,000 taels of silver tickets with him. Lucien didn't stop him and sent it to the door. However, boarding the carriage back home, Xie sat in the carriage, staring at the ink on the pile of silver tickets in his hand, and really thought about it for a long time. When he arrived at the gate of Defoe, he got out of the car. Dakin looked at him a little wrong. Xie lowered his eyes, but he didn't know what to think. He suddenly smiled and said, "Go to Jiang's mansion tomorrow and ask Ning Er to come over to learn the piano. Although you don't have to go to Fengchen Palace, you can't fall behind in your studies." Asterisk. Zhou Yinzi's dark feeling was shocked. Jiang Xuaning's side got enough money in the afternoon, and it was really unwilling to give such a large amount of money directly to others, and these people were still secretly left by the heavenly sect, so they couldn't intercept the money, and they could make a contribution if they caught these people. So when revealing the news to Xie, she also made second-hand preparations. Trading with the other party in the evening is deliberate. The ambush in the city was too eye-catching, so he asked Zhou Yinzi to find another name and mobilized some brocade guards to ambush outside the city gate, and even let out the 2 heavenly sect rebels they had arrested before, and just waited for this group of people to come out of the city and intercept and kill them, to see if they could get the 50,000 taels back by luck. But after waiting all night, no one left the city. Zhou Yinzi arrived at the yamen early the next morning, and heard from his colleagues that the city gate guards shot and killed several Tianjia rebels last night, and it seemed that they paid to buy the guards to get out of the city, but they didn't expect the city gate guards to be false and wronged, just waiting for them to throw themselves into the net. Zhou Yinzi of those heavenly sect rebels has dealt with each other. The people in the rivers and lakes are righteous but very shrewd, and they can know through the clues that their eyeliner has been caught, and then take half a letter out to force them to comply, and talk about a bold business. How can they fall into the link of buying the city gate guards? Unless it's someone they trust who contacts them. But something happened. The other party betrayed them and killed them. The things involved inside must be complicated, and Zhou Yinzi's understanding of the inside of the heavenly sect is even less clear, but he can clearly perceive this news when he suddenly hears it, and behind this matter, in addition to him and Jiang Xuaning plotting, there seems to be a thick and unpredictable shadow. Bigger, more secretive. I have to say that at that moment, what he thought of was what Jiang Xuaning had told him to leak the news before. Could it be related to the young master Xie who he had never dealt with but was known as a saint? Zhou Yinzi once again felt that in this treacherous capital, he was just a small wave lifted by the turbulent sea, no different from the grains of sand that were brought by the waves lying on the shallows. When you enter the world, you know that the world is big. Since becoming a Jinyi Weiqianhu and gaining a firm foothold in the yamen, he has actually begun to think about what Jiang Xuaning, an insignificant little girl, can bring to himself after the fall of the Yanji Marquis mansion. This time, however, he found that even this little girl doesn't seem to have reached the real bottom yet. Zhou Yunzi came to Jiang's mansion again, but he put away his shelves in front of his subordinates, just like when he first arrived in the capital and was still working in Jiangfu. He looked humble and forbearing. Jiang Xuning didn't wait for news from Zhou Yunzi's side last night, and she was still worried this morning. Unexpectedly, just thinking about it, he came upside down. She asked, "How's it going?" Zhou Yunzi recounted the situation last night and what he heard in the yamen this morning. He observed Jiang Xuning's expression. Surprisingly, Jiang Xuning didn't seem to be as dignified as he thought, but as if expected, he breathed a sigh of relief, but then frowned, as if he was relieved, and added a little bit of faint worry. Zhou Yunzi said tentatively, "Do you want to check it secretly?" Jiang Xuning held onto the corner of the carved lacquered mahogany case, sat down slowly, shook her head almost immediately, and said, "Don't check. At times like this, the more you do, the more you get wrong." She said, "I already know the matter, you go back, and don't worry about anything in the future." Zhou Yunzi felt that her speech today was more profound than any previous speech, revealing an unpredictable incomprehension, so that he showed rare hesitation. Jiang Xuning said, "Is there anything else?" Zhou Yunzi reined in his mind at this time, although he wanted to ask what was behind this matter, but remembering that she had also unprovoked her intention to sneak into the Yanji Marquis mansion that day, she was a little jealous of the little girl in front of her, and she was afraid that she would be dissatisfied with her heart, so she said, "It's nothing, it's just a little accident. Then the lower official will go back first, and the second girl will send someone to find me. If I'm not in the government, I can find Wuxi." Jiang Xuning remembered the blushing young man she saw in Zhou Yun's mansion that day, and said in her heart that this was a good candidate, so she nodded, "Got it?" Zhou Yunzi said goodbye. As soon as he left, Jiang Shui sat quietly for a long time, and suddenly held his head and hit the table. "Sure enough, it's him, it's going to be over. That's 50,000 taels. Swapped out so many things that Yan Lin gave her, attached herself to herself, and sold the silver shares of Ren Salt Farm that were rising just right in her hand, which was finally made up. Was coerced by the heavenly sect in vain, although it was spent on the blade, but he was always a little unhappy in his heart. And she was also worried that these people would eat black, so she had to make three-handed preparations. First, it is honest to give money from your side, and it would be great if you could get the letter smoothly. In fact, it worked. The other party is indeed quite trustworthy, or maybe they think that they are willing to run for the affairs of the Yanji Marquis mansion, and they should also be loyal and righteous people who keep their promises, and they really handed over the letter to her. Second, Zhou Yunzi was sent to ambush outside the city gate, just in case, whether it was blocking the letter or intercepting the money, it would be regarded as a credit. That didn't work. This brings us to the third point. Third, she also ordered the news to be leaked secretly, so that Xie Wei's side could detect the clues, and then also get involved in this matter, which can be said to be the last guarantee for the overall situation. Because she didn't dare to say that the first 2 points were foolproof. This is a major event related to the survival of the Marquis of Yanji. Losing money, or even exposing oneself, becomes small and worthless in the face of this big event. Jiang Xuning couldn't afford to risk failure. So she took a gamble. Bet that Xie Wei, whom she knew in her previous life, was secretly a terrifying person, and bet that this person must have the ability to control the overall situation as long as he knows the news, and also bet that he cares about the Yanji Marquis mansion, or rather, a gamble. In the previous life, Yu Fangyan's guess has never been confirmed by anyone. However, Jiang Xuning didn't know whether to say lucky or unlucky. This guess was almost confirmed by herself in this life this time. Let's ask. Xie Zhuan was born in Jinling and grew up in the south of the Yangtze River, and has never had a deep friendship with the Yanji Marquis mansion, and Jiao Yanlin was just a passing when he presided over the feast day in Wenyuan Pavilion, neither personal interests, nor the deep affection for retribution in adversity, but he just got a little bit of news about chasing the wind and shadows, so he was willing to give up his strength and take the risk to set up a killing situation in the city gate. The ruthlessness of the means and the benefits of the actions are terrifying. How can it really have nothing to do with the Ho mansion? In the last life, Jiang Xuning also knew a secret. That is, Xiao Dingfei, who later returned to Xiao's Jiaoerlang and was so angry that the entire Xiao family was like thunder, was not really Dingfei's son at all. The man was drunk. The government and the opposition were convinced at the beginning whether this person was really the son of the world. After all, he knew everything back then, but after a long time, he always felt that how such a good person when he was a child grew up like this, and secretly there was no criticism. She also has a lot of thoughts about it. So, taking advantage of that time, I schemingly asked him about his experience when he was outcast in the past. As a result, this prodigal man staggered, and took advantage of the fact that no one in the pavilion saw her, and deliberately took advantage of her to approach, his lips almost touching her ear, and said, Niang thinks that I am drunk, maybe I will say some truth, right? Jiang Xuning was startled and wanted to retreat. Unexpectedly, this person actually grabbed her sleeve hard, pulled the corners of his lips quite wickedly, and locked her with burning eyes. If Niang is willing to sleep with me, I will tell you that I am indeed not the Dingfei Shizi. He said that he was indeed not the son of the world. This took her by surprise. However, the boldness of this person's behavior was really surprising to Jiang Xuning. She didn't think that the other party would dare to be so presumptuous in the palace, so she suddenly turned cold, shook off his hand and retreated. Xiao Dingfei's feet shook a little, and he couldn't stand firmly, but the smile on his lips not only did not subside but deepened, and he actually put the finger that had just pulled the sleeve of her gorgeous palace dress under his nose and sniffed lightly. The eyes engraved are all annoying Meng Lang. Jiang Xunning's eyes were cold. You are looking for death. Xiao Dingfei didn't pay attention to the eyebrows, but pressed the index finger on his lips, branded a kiss, and chuckled. I think it's because Niang doesn't know her situation, and spies on things she shouldn't know every day. If that person knows what you heard me say today, I'm afraid that he doesn't want to, and he still has to settle accounts with me, and he must kill his mother first. The palace people who went to get the cloak for her came back at this time and were startled when they saw Xiao Dingfei. She closed her mouth and said no more. Xiao Dingfei didn't have a straight shape. He saluted her crookedly, then retreated from the pavilion, and returned to the banquet again. Since then, Jiang Xuning can't help but think, who is the person Xiao Dingfei said, who is he? And maybe he doesn't plan to kill himself, that proves that the other party has at least this ability. But I don't have a clue when I think about it. But Xiao Dingfei knows everything that the real Dingfei Shizi can know, no matter how big or small, so the only thing she can be sure of is that if there is a plot behind it, it must have a great connection with the real Dingfei Shizi. However, until he killed Cunning Palace, he couldn't break the secret. Now, Jiang Xuning, whose forehead was on the carved lacquer table, suddenly raised her head again when she thought of this. How is it possible? Her brow furrowed. She was really confused. If this person was Xie Wei, according to what Xiao Dingfei said, how could he not want to kill her? No. It's not certain that this person is Xie Wei. There may not be no one else in Jingzhou who is involved in this matter. Maybe it is indeed the people of the heavenly sect who acted carelessly and were caught by others. The key is in those 15 silver tickets. If the person behind the scenes is indeed Xie Wei, and Lucien is there, the other party will definitely recognize the origin of these 15 silver tickets, and after a little inspection, you will find the words written on the silver tickets, and then know her identity. Jiang Xuning was afraid that the person behind him was Xie Wei, so she thought about it for a long time and wrote those words on the silver ticket. Because she didn't have any more time to redeem the silver ticket. And even if it is exchanged, such a large sum of money can be found if you want to check it. If the person behind it is not Siewei, of course it doesn't matter, even if others find out, they don't know what it means, for her it is nothing more than doing an idle pen, 50,000 taels of silver are wasted, but if it is indeed Siewei who intercepted and killed people, and saw the silver ticket and didn't see the letter, he must have made a desperate effort to check the whereabouts of the letter. Paper can't hold the fire. What's more, how can she be compared to Siewei? Just in case, it is better to bow her head and admit her mistake first, because she is indeed not malicious, but has also helped the Marquis of Yangji a lot. If you wait for Siewei to find out by himself, it will be too late to admit his mistake, and it will inevitably arouse the suspicion and jealousy of the other party. And she also hoped that if it was Siewei, the 50,000 taels might not be able to come back. So, who did the 15 silver tickets go to? Zhang Xunning's eyelids jumped inexplicably. Tang Er, who had just gone out to receive the monthly money, came back at this time, but she was a little careful on her face, and said to Zhang Xunning, "Second girl, someone came to the front hall, saying that it was ordered by young Master Xie, please go and learn the piano, no matter what, your homework can't be left behind." Zhang Xunning. A sense of foreboding hits. She pressed her eyelids. "Okay, I'll go another day." Tang Er trembled. That person said, "You can't change the day, young Master Xie is busy, you have to go as soon as possible today." Zhang Xunning. In such a hurry, did she rush to reincarnate after teaching her piano? So those 15 silver tickets really fell into the hands of the surnamed Xie.